Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Masha Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. In today's episode, Michelle and I are speaking with Zack Phillips and Nikki Zavadska about how they are using LogRocket for session replay. So let's dive in. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Hey, thanks everyone for having us. I'm Zack Phillips, Appfire. I'm a senior product analyst, and I've been working with LogRocket now for around a year and a half since I've joined Appfire.
Excellent. Welcome to the show.
And hi, I'm Nikki Zavadska. I'm a lead product manager on a growth team at Appfire. And I would also like to give you an intro into Appfire so you know what we do. So Appfire is a global provider of software that enhances, extends, and connects the world's leading platforms like Atlassian, Microsoft, Monday.com, and Salesforce. And on our growth team and growth ops team, we focus on the apps across all of these platforms and across the Appfire portfolio. And our goal is to improve the user experience, workflows, activation, and conversion of our products.
Nice, amazing. And hi, I'm Moshe, and hi everyone. Hey Matt, welcome to the show. And this time we have two guests talking about LogRocket, mainly because we found that it's going to be really interesting because Appfire is one type of company that I actually don't think we ever on the podcast spoke with someone like that are building that are being sold on other platforms. And also Zack is more on the operational end of things, helping the different product teams in product ops to to have the right tools to do the work. And Nikki is more from one specific team using it. So we felt it will be really awesome to speak with both of them on the show rather than just one point of view. Like, why only one point of view?
Let's have a party, right? So this is great.
Exactly.
More the merrier.
And you guys are joining us from Zack. You're from from Georgia.
I'm from North Carolina, but I'm
North
a
Carolina.
few hours north of where Matt's at. Yeah,
I messed up my entire.
Hey, that's another U.S. based person here, Moshe. Let's put that on the board.
Yes, we are counting it Canada versus the U.S. But I guess. And Nikki is from the U.K. actually.
Yes, I'm based in the UK, originally from Czech Republic.
Very
awesome.
Nice.
Across the pond.
Amazing.
Yes.
And for those that cannot see us because this is audio, they have also really cool backgrounds.
Oh yeah, it's a neon sign. It says kawaii in Japanese, which means cute.
Very nice. Yeah, I love neon signs. So using them as decoration in the house, it's amazing. So it is very cool. Zack's on the other end, he has like at least six that I can see electric guitars, but maybe he has some more that are outside of the vision of the camera.
Yeah, it's sort of a happy accident when you work from home and you have all your personal hobbies. It's kind of, it all ends up in one single office. Yeah, so it works out well for a Zoom background.
Yeah, so do you have more than six, or six is the number?
I think I've got like 18 across the house, but all the nice ones are in here with me that I would access routinely, yeah.
There's probably an acoustic guitar somewhere around there, I'm sure.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll talk about products for guitarists or something like that. I don't know.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, have me back on that episode.
For musicians, yes.
Will do.
A whole different type of podcast. Amazing. So you gave us a bit of background about yourself. Thank you about that. Let's dive in directly into LogRocket because this is what we're here for. We want to learn a bit, about your use case. Why do you use LogRocket? How do you use it? So let's start with the basics. I know that your company have chosen LogRocket over some other session replays. Let's start maybe with that. Why did they choose it over others?
Yeah, I wasn't at the company when the initial product decision was made. I think I joined probably a couple months after, but I was able to have some conversation with our team who led the product search. And essentially what it came down to is, I think, combination of their features. It was a right fit for our company in terms of how their licensing model worked and how we have sort of a fun multi-project need for every platform we adopt, which is always a consideration for Appfire. And then one of the major points that I know was sort of the final consideration is To comment on what you mentioned earlier, like we do sell our products in other platforms, and that always introduces additional technical constraints that I think we find sometimes other companies they just don't plan for. And I'm not sure the full tech stack, but I know LogRocket has essentially built their session replay mechanics based off of a proprietary engine. They built it all in-house. It's not using any sort of shared components, which I know is something that some of the other platforms use. And the fact that they did that allowed them to work much more seamlessly with the way our products are sold in terms of being able to load as a third-party iframe on some of the other sites. I know that was a major technical consideration. Then when it came down to like the top two products, they were just better in that regard, and it was going to be a more workable solution for us long term.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and that's also when we got ready for this episode. I found this really fascinating. So maybe that's why I'm kind of biased about starting the episode with this specific question, because we many times we don't really go into that detail, like why one product versus the other, because many of them will do similar things. We talked in the past about wide versus deep. We talked about pricing. Of course, pricing is always at the end of the day something companies are conscious about. But there is also value and the feasibility that this specific product will be a better fit than any other product, right? So you found that with LogRocket. That's amazing. Can you share with us, how is from the product operations end of things, how is the implementation done across the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and let me give a little context too, because I think you'll see this in a lot of our answers. But Appfire is always like a multi-project setup. The way we have products, we have many products that we sell here, and that means any of our PLG platforms, whether it's Session Replay or any of our event analytics products, they have to be set up, and we're going to expand it very wide. And so any tool, any platform, that's one of the first things that we validate is like, what's going to happen when we spin up 30, 40, 50 projects right out of the gate, which is not a use case that I've gathered a lot of these companies here, especially not for new users, but we pretty much scale right out of the gate. And so I think the experience in the org is that like LogRocket has been really easy to do that in. Their platform is sort of built out of the box where that's not a major concern. Sometimes that's not the case, but luckily, like for us, it was really easy to sort of spin up. Deploying in the organization, because we have a platform ops team, and that's where I primarily work, we have the benefit of having some sort of initial points of contact that are typically fairly savvy. We've got certain rights. And so when we bring a new platform like LogRocket into our org, we're going to set it up quickly. We're going to have all of sort of the expertise, do all the enterprise stuff that normally you might have to kind of mess with for a couple of months. We typically have that configured initially. And then we've almost always alongside that process been working with some of our product partners. We have a list of people who are basically willing to sort of be the first round implementation for something like this. And so we try to take care of as many things for them as possible. If we're going to be involving developers, we want to sort of make sure that we're as efficient as possible with their time. And then for LogRocket, I would say that like the actual integration and setup has been fairly painless. It's not a complicated process. And in terms of like building out the projects, getting everyone access within the organization, and even the permissions model, it's all fairly extensible. And so we were able to sort of set it up for what made sense for our org without much issue.
That's great to hear. So when you're saying product partners, you mean internally in the organization, like Nikki and her products, right?
Exactly. Yeah. We would typically, like once we made the decision that we wanted to invest in a session replay tool, we kind of did the selection, got it stood up, and then we would go to someone like Nikki or one of our other products and triage that work to make sure that it got done as efficiently as possible.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So I was actually working on a different team before I moved to the growth team, and we were one of those partners who got jumped on the implementation quite early because we saw the value in the product. And the implementation itself with the engineers was fairly quick. Just like a few days, not even days, like hours, right? But you need to schedule the work. And Zack's team usually like prepares everything for us and does that initial research. So then the engineers are super fast to implement and everything is done really quickly. So we haven't had problems on that end.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about use cases. Like what type of use cases would you use LogRocket for session replay?
Mm-hmm. So we use a lot of different PLG platforms, like different data analytic data analytics platforms and so on. But what we do like about LogRocket is that you don't need to be as intentional, and you don't need to like necessarily immediately know what you're looking for when you are analyzing, right? So what we use most of the time is heat maps and rage click reports, dead click reports, like a long annoying requests and so on, like performance reports. Zack's team also was great and scheduled kind of like a daily digest reports for us. So every week we get the information if there is something wrong going on in the application. And if there is something wrong, we can dig deeper. So for example, we had kind of like a notification that on one of our products that there was an increase in the dead clicks on a certain element. And when we looked a little bit deeper, we noticed that it was kind of like a silly issue. It was a page that was not necessarily high priority. It was some empty state on a filter, but we've seen that users were rage clicking, and what they were doing was they were basically highlighting text because we released a dark mode for that particular page, and there wasn't a text like adjusted to the dark mode, so they were double clicking to see the text. So you can spot issues like this that you would normally miss, and there are more examples like this.
Mhm. The process there, how did that happen? You first is there any like type of a notification tell you there are dead clicks over there, and then you dive into like session replays to see what actually happened?
Yes, so you get a notification that there are some kind of rage clicks because people are like double clicking, right, to highlight. And then in these rage click reports, you can see the different elements that users are rage clicking on. I actually went because I was curious. It was just after we implemented LogRocket on one of our apps, and I really wanted to know what was going on there. And I went through every single rage click to basically see why are people rage clicking, like what's going on and how we can fix it. You don't really want users to do that. And this was one of the elements, and I found it really interesting because when you look at it like very high level, you see like users are rage clicking on the text, like why, right? And then when you look at the actual recording, you're like, oh, it's a dark mode issue. You wouldn't like normally even think about this.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So what it does is it tells you, notifies you, hey, there's a problem here. Then you go look and identify what the problem is, but then you can go down another level and actually view the recording of the experience.
Yeah.
Yes. So this daily digest, I think it was set up by the Zack's team, so he can give a little bit more details. I'm actually like user of this setup, right?
Okay.
In this case, because of the dark mode, and maybe you were not in dark mode, it's hard to really tell just by trying it out why the rage click over there. Like, why would people click on something like that? So it makes so much sense that the session replay is that tool that will actually show you what happened to them specifically, and only then you will see they were in dark mode probably, and you will connect those dots that maybe there is another place in the system that can tell you, yes, they were in dark mode because maybe in their settings or whatever, but it's sometimes hard to connect these things without thinking about these two different separate dots, right? So the session replay can show it right away.
Yeah, and I want to call out because I think that's what we've found is session replay in terms of like looking at a single user session is obviously great when you're trying to validate something. But in fact, at the scale that we tend to run at, the most valuable feature that I think we get is where the system automatically detects like something weird is happening here, right? And a lot of times it can't give you a perfect why, but it's the signal to noise ratio where it's like, okay, I've got 1,000 sessions and I'm getting feedback that here are 3 issues that we've seen a certain percentage of time that we think are worth digging into. That really helps out your sort of your human reviewers to go in and say, okay, well, let me not look at every session. That's an impossible task once you start doing any sort of volume. But you're able to sort of drill into those issues like Nikki commented on and say, okay, there's something weird happening here. Let me see if I can do a quick figure out why. And the ability to kind of go from that very general to specific without wasting a lot of cycles searching through things arbitrarily, I think is a huge benefit of a platform like this.
That's cool. LogRocket's landing page promotes AI. Have you experienced that? Have you used that? I see. We talk about this on the show. Moshe and I have this AI thing going back and forth. So I'm a big proponent of it. You know, in terms of an assistant, I could see it really being a value in that use case where, hey, you've identified this and you bubble all that up. So have you used that?
Yeah, we have it turned on for our account, and I think we've been using it for a while now. Like any product, it's gone through or any feature, it's gone through a couple of revisions. But I think the big thing that we get with Galileo, and part of the reason we like it, is that what LogRocket surfaces might be something like an aggregate JavaScript error. So something very technical, right? Like, oh, like
Mm-hmm.
5% of your people are seeing this JavaScript error.
Mm-hmm.
What Galileo does is it will translate that into sort of more human terms, and it will say things. It will actually do this. It'll post back to one of our Slack channels where it'll say, oh, your users are having a hard time proceeding to the next step of this event because there's some sort of issue. And it'll put it in terms that like your non-technical
The
staff.
layman, right?
Yeah, like so if they see something like, oh, customers can't get through the product or they're running into issues, I think it's just more effective than dropping a big JavaScript network error or something like that and expecting someone to triage it.
I noticed LogRocket also kind of caters to session replay for developers as well. So we did talk about a company called PostHog, which is session replay for developer centric. Sounds like LogRocket kind of plays with both. So it caters to developers, but also to product and product analysts. So do you see that demarcation in the product?
You can definitely use it for both, right? So
Okay.
I'm using it heavily on the product side and to understand basically user behavior in the product and how to improve that. However, our engineers, specifically on the team that I was implementing the LogRocket on, we were very excited because it gives us performance reports. We can understand what requests are taking too long and too little, as additional to any other performance dashboards that we have, of course. But like here is a little bit more granular, and it can go from that high level to low level very quickly. You can see what's happening. Plus, the error kind of like replicating into errors is also easier because you understand the steps. So it was really good for us too.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, Moshe and I, we talk about what the typical persona of session replay could be, but we see it even expanding into like customer success and stuff like that. So it's a really broad persona of people that could use it. So that's cool. Good to hear.
Yeah, that's it's always really interesting to hear how different organizations are using it. And I love that example that you gave earlier with the dark mode, because I can see how it could be very frustrating to find this. I'm also not a very big opponent of dark modes. I use light mode. I don't care about dark mode so much, but
I'm dark mode everything. I'm dark mode everything.
Yeah.
Moshe and I, we balance each other well.
Very well, exactly. Matt is the angel sitting on your right shoulder. I'm the devil.
That's right.
No, that's really cool. And we know that all of those products, including LogRocket, and you mentioned some of the other features, are not just session replay products. Although I believe that LogRocket is quite robust in session replay. When you looked, or maybe if you even use other products, when you kind of compared it with other products or whatever, what are the strengths in LogRocket that you see?
I mean, going back, I think there's some technical requirements that we had that they were a clear winner and they stood out. I think session replay has gotten quite popular in the market, right? So I think that there's a lot of strong competitors out there. And I think you're right that there's a trend to say that companies that might have launched as session replay have drastically expanded their product to cover analytics use cases, application performance management use cases, things like that. When we adopted LogRocket, it was primarily for session replay. That's primarily how we use it. We have a variety of other PLG platforms, as Nikki mentioned, that we do traditional sort of event-based analytics on. We don't uniquely rely on LogRocket to try to fill those needs, though it does cover our bases some. And one thing I think I want to call out there is that there's a different philosophy about how things are tracked, whereas a traditional event analytics system for products, that would almost always be something like a developers are adding events to key points on your product, or they're using one of the visual labeling tools, depending on what's out there. But it's all very intentional. Whereas with session replay and kind of how LogRocket approaches it, and where we get a lot of value from it, is they capture it like in a session replay format, which is where they're watching the DOM and they're sort of sending events that they're detecting automatically without any sort of developer or product manager having to go in there and call it all out. We find that having both in the organization has been incredibly helpful for things that we want to call our shots on and we want to be very specific. We do experiments, things like that. We'll put it in our traditional product analytics tool and try to build it out. But there have been occasions, and I had a great use case recently where there was a mistake. Something didn't get instrumented the way it was supposed to be, and we found out about it 3-4 weeks after the fact. We actually were able to go back and look at LogRocket. The product had been changed. We just weren't sending our analytics, and we caught the events in LogRocket because they're being captured automatically. And we were able to actually pull the data out of LogRocket, clean it up, and put it into our primary product analytics system to sort of capture those events that were missed traditionally. And just having that sort of like coverage is something that's hard to beat once you've had to use it for one of those oh no use cases. And so yeah, like LogRocket, it constantly like comes in and like fills the gap on some of these situations that maybe we didn't realize we needed to cover.
I see. Interesting. So how do they know to show this deviation from the norm? Because that's how it feels like. It's a more of it's I won't say it's passive from your perspective that you don't have to set up too much, but it's active from their perspective that they are watching everything. Do they just start collecting information about how people are using it, create a baseline from that, this is the norm, and then show variation from that? Or do so you don't have to tell it anything about the product, and they will over time give you this kind of signals that something is going on?
Yeah, that's basically our experience. And my understanding of how that works is they're going to look for anything that's like a network error or like a classic development error, like a resource failed to load. That's fairly easy for them to detect in your product, and no surprise that they can capture and return those. But they also do, as part of like reviewing the DOM, they can also see text on the screen like, we're sorry. Like if you pop up a developer coded error message, they'll pick up on like the sentiment of that text. And I'm sure they've got a model for how they sort of determine that. But that's one of the things that we've seen is like if we've coded an error and it'll show up and be like, hey, a lot of users saw this error this month, like probably more than normal. That's where it gets it, where it builds some sort of trigger based off the semantic use in the app and can kind of have multiple inputs to that.
Okay. Or rage clicks or things like that are usually not normal as things like that. Would they also be able to tell you, no one is actually accessing a specific page, so they're getting stuck somewhere in the process?
I don't know, Nikki, I don't know if you run into that, but I don't know that they do that out of the box, but I know that there are tools available to sort of surface that if you suspect something.
Right.
Yes, there are journey map reports. So if your page has like a unique URL, you would be able to build up the journey, and then you would see that the page is missing. Users are not getting to that particular point, but also because it tracks the elements on the screen, on the one particular screen, you can track the journey itself. So you can see in a journey analytics then where people are dropping and where they're moving along in the journey as well.
I'm just flawed here because I'm familiar with other systems that will allow you to create a path that you want people to go through, and then it will show you how many people are getting there and they're dropping. But again, you have to physically go and define that path, or they will show you a specific funnel, or maybe that's a funnel actually. That's called more of a funnel. And then a path is actually when they show you this is what people are doing, and then you will see percentages and you can see stuff like that. But I was thinking maybe they can even take it into another step there by you don't even have to look at the path, and they will tell you already, pay attention to these pages that you have in the system, and because no one is getting there or stuff like that.
Yeah, I see. I don't think that's a thing it can do today.
Maybe it's an idea for them if they listen.
It is. I'm going to get them on the phone as soon as this
feedback.
See if we can talk it out.
Yeah, there's one interesting thing about our apps, which is a lot of our apps are like a smaller, not like multi-screen applications. So that's why maybe this particular use case didn't pop up. We have like a huge, bigger apps, like for example, Big Picture, that are like multi-pages, but then there are smaller apps that maybe live just as an iframe in one specific like issue view, maybe in the Atlassian Jira ticket, right? So there you wouldn't really do this path analysis as much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That might follow into a question I had about security and compliance. Whenever you're recording anybody doing anything these days, you got to be aware of security and compliance. That's obviously something important at Appfire. Probably very important to the customers like Atlassian that you're working with. So how does LogRocket handle that? And does it give you the tools necessary to handle security and compliance concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, so I'll kind of go from like the outside in, like internally, it's been great. Like with all these platforms, there's always a question when you get into enterprise about setting up your internal users to be able to sort of see only what they need to see. They've got a very granular permission system, which we're always appreciative of. And then through the process of actually instrumenting the session replay, I know that always comes up, right? Because we're recording things from the DOM. They have a couple things. So they have their own PII identification, like automation that's enabled by default. That's good. There's there to sort of like be a second set of hands to sort of say like, hey, we think we see something that shouldn't be instrumented. At Appfire, we have the luxury of having a team dedicated to this. So before anything gets launched into production, it's been reviewed by our team. We go through actual sessions that have been captured in dev and look for elements and things like that that need to be redacted. If we do find something like that, there's a couple of different approaches. It's not a one size fits all. So we work with the product teams to make these decisions. But they've got a ton of different ways to sort of redact individual elements. Like if you see a user input form, like none of that stuff gets captured. It's part of our review process before anything goes live that the app has been correctly approached. And they also have like some convenient features. We have a few teams using it who are just like any human input, mask it like a all at once sort of toggle. And so they have nice options to sort of let you cater it depending on how granular you want to go to like block things out and make certain elements just not be captured in the session replay. They also have, and this is something that we had to come back on and learn a little bit more about after like the very first phase. You can do similar things for that network stack that it captures. That's more on the dev side. And so we worked with a couple of our developers to look at sort of what is common in any API calls or anything that are going out that might be captured on the like the dev tools side of your browser. That can also be sort of redacted to make sure you're not unintentionally capturing something like a session key or something like that that's generated at runtime for a user. So we went through all that, and so far there's not anything that I've found that we haven't been able to clean up before it went live for a customer.
Oh, that's great to hear. So there's gates in place to ensure the privacy.
Amazing. What about integrations? Because we talked before about another system that you're using. Do they have built-in integrations that you can use, or do you have to do that on your own with those other systems?
I think they do have some built-in integrations. I will say it's not something we've used heavily. We have sort of like a fairly traditional data stack, and so one of the things we look at is some sort of like in-house integrations between it. With our event tracking system, one of the things we recently worked on is sort of, can we capture the LogRocket session at runtime? So if we actually see a pattern of behavior in one of our major event tools where we have a lot of our funnels and things like that defined, if we see something that's concerning or that stands out, we want to understand it. We are actually like grabbing that LogRocket session information and tracking it there as well. So it's very easy to work backwards, and where we say like, okay, I've seen a general pattern. Let me work back to the specific session recording, which has been great. And then we recently have set up like the full export from LogRocket to be able to integrate it into our data warehouse. That is fairly new, so we're working through that process right now. It wasn't hard to set up, but anytime you're dealing with big data stuff like that, like there's a fair amount of like, let's whip it into shape so that we can use it for something productive. So that's probably going to be a focus of ours for the next little bit.
I see. So if you have use cases where you get maybe highlights from LogRocket, but then you still need to go to another system that captures some of the user data and stuff like that. Is that something you still have to like go one by one and do that?
Yes and no. I think some of that is sort of dependent upon how we do our tracking, and that's just an Appfire thing. That's how we've chosen to set it up today. I think if we had a different product stack, they offer like a lot more automated solutions, but it's just, it is what it is for how we decided to go about it. Certainly something we would consider in the future if the tech stack changed or we found a new need, we would evaluate an integration.
Great, amazing. We always ask our guests also what are the things they don't like about the product. So if LogRocket is listening to this, it will be another point for their listen to their clients.
Totally.
Yes.
I think we both have an answer for this. Nikki, you want to go first?
Of course. So the way I look at these tools is like they're built for something, and that's what they're really good at. And then they give you extra additional features that you might choose to use or not use, but they're not necessarily specializing in this area. And with the LogRocket specifically, there's one feature that we were using that was great. And it was great POC that we ran, which was collecting the customer satisfaction and NPS scores with the LogRocket forms, and it proved to be very effective and great. But at the end, we decided, because we have like a dedicated messaging platform, another product that we are using that specializes in this and goes a little bit more in depth, for certain products to go with that platform, and for products that don't use that platform still use LogRocket. So it's not necessarily like bad, but depending on how deep you want to go, you just pick a product that's basically more suitable for this. So it just depends on the maturity of that platform and the team, and also use case that you're trying to do. Like, do you want to quick and fast? This might be suitable more at that moment.
It's simpler functionality. It's still working, but it's a simpler functionality that might not fit every team at your organization.
Yes. Or also depends how fast you want to deploy the solution. So when we wanted to run just a proof of concept, this was great, because we wanted to get something fast out of the door and see if it's worth investing more time.
Okay, great. What about you, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of same direction as what Nikki indicated. I don't really have anything specific that LogRocket has sort of done that is given me trouble. Like any company, like we've given them feedback on certain things, and they've actually been quite responsive in taking our feedback into consideration. We've had some things updated in the product specifically based off our feedback, which we're always incredibly appreciative of. I would say probably like the biggest challenge that I think we run into with really using the session replay approach is some products I think work better in that than others. And what I mean by that is, because of the way it's tracking like the DOM model, apps that use some of these newer front end libraries where it's like the DOM is constantly being modified by the back end code, and that's just how the product is built. Those can be a bit trickier to make that get the full value out of the session replay if you want to dig into analytics, because it's just like you're taking the area that a session replay tool is trying to make sense of, and you're just introducing chaos. And a lot of times, the bigger, the more complicated the app is. So that's an area where it's like, I don't know that I would approach that if given the opportunity. I think in those situations, we tend to find that we have a better time getting outcomes from more of a traditional analytics process, where it's like we can't rely on the chaos that's happening under the hood just because, React or whatever it is moving so many elements around. The names are constantly changing. Calling your shots there tends to work a bit better. So I have had a few situations where like I was maybe optimistic I was going to be able to jump into what was captured passively to the session replay. And just for whatever reason, like our product was so crazy that it wasn't as useful as I'd seen it for other products. And I think that's probably a decent consideration for anybody who's looking at a session replay tool, to like have an understanding of what you're bringing to the table, because these tools are incredible. I've worked support roles in the past, and like having a session replay tool at previous jobs would have been a dream come true.
Yes.
But they can't solve all your product's problems if your product has some chaos in there, and you might have to do a little bit of work at the company level to sort of make it work for you.
Yeah, when I started implementing similar products in data analytics, product analytics, etc., I also noticed that your stack and the way you build the product can heavily affect the usability of any of those products. So it's not how good those products are, it's also how fitting it is to your product, and what might be some of those gotchas that you might get there when you try to implement it. So
Absolutely.
The POC was always very important to do with my product. First of all, to see, can my product speak well with this platform we're trying to implement it with? And then I had in one of the companies where I worked, I wanted to change a bit how the developers are writing their code so it will fit a bit better into how we identify elements on the screen and stuff like that. And they refused to do it. They were like, you're making us do something that is against our best practices, et cetera, et cetera. So you have sometimes these considerations. So it's always really important to include your developers when you make decisions about these type of platforms. Even if you think it works now, it may not work tomorrow. Or if they now have to make new decisions about the technical stack, they need to take this into consideration. Would it also work with whatever toolings that we're using? So really good point over there.
Question for Nikki, as a growth product manager, when you're doing session recording for session replay, you're seeing how customers or users experience what you had today. But as we know with growth, there's things that you don't see. There's things that don't exist yet. So where do you find opportunities to say, okay, like based on this replay, they're missing something, and this is an opportunity to go build this feature or add this functionality? Do you use it in that kind of way?
I'm just thinking of like all the processes that come into our growth experiments. I can tell you how we use the LogRocket to inform the direction of the experiments, right? So we usually like define our activation journey, and we have a goal of the user, what we want them to achieve, and that's the number that we are trying to lift, the conversion rate or activation rate. And usually that's tied to some action in the product. And with one specific product, we had loads of different buttons on the screen that all were kind of calling on you, click me, and there were maybe like 20 of them, right? So we knew which buttons we want to highlight to the users, but we also needed to get rid of the buttons that are not as used. So because that product wasn't like 100% instrumented on our normal data analytics platform, we needed to tap into LogRocket and go to the heat maps to figure out. So we didn't go to each individual session, but we looked at the click heat maps to see what elements are being clicked most in the application, and basically what buttons to prioritize and what buttons to deprioritize. So it kind of like you just put all of those different data points together, and that's how you decide at the end. But this is like one of the examples of how we used it to inform the growth experiments and basically deprioritize elements on the page and prioritize others, plus highlight the actions that we want to users to take.
That's great. Yeah, experimentation, A/B testing kind of stuff. Okay, that's wonderful to hear. Okay, cool. A company doesn't use session replay, isn't doing it today. What would be your piece of advice if they want to look into session replay, if they want to look into LogRocket, if they would just want to bring this on board with their team? Where should they start?
That's a good one. I would say from my side, I think session replay really covers a gap that you might not realize that you have. I think I mentioned earlier, like the support use case is just, it's so obvious. When you have customers who are coming into a traditional support workflow and they're like, yeah, I clicked the button and something didn't happen. I've been in that role where you need to then explain to maybe a dev team. It's like, hey, customers are telling us this is happening. And what's the first thing they say? Well, prove it. I need some evidence before I'm going to take time off my sprint and go work on this. You get it out of the box, right? And so the first time I started working with LogRocket, that was my immediate takeaway. I even reached out to some folks at my previous company and were like, you might want to look into this. Like this would solve a huge need, reduce personnel time needed to do that. Since I've been using the product though here at Appfire, I think that I have much better appreciation for what it can do in terms of giving you feedback or maybe validating assumptions that you might have about the product. I think Nikki's use case was stellar. Like that's one of those things that there's a group of stakeholders around a product and you're trying to make a decision. If you got 3 buttons that all do the same thing, somebody's going to be convinced that button 1 is the one you need to keep and button 2 is the one that, and this is a great way just to sort of take the data and say, well, customers are voting with their clicks and they're going for the third option. That can remove a lot of friction and sort of what's the right decision to make with the product. And that's one of the things that every day, like our different teams are coming up with new and creative ways to use it to inform and validate the things that maybe they already thought, but they just need some confirmation that it's actually happening. So I would say like for anybody who's considering it, like definitely from what I've seen on the market, it's pretty easy to get into one of these tools, whether it's LogRocket or one of the other ones. They're very generous about like getting started with the product. Test it out. Test the one that you think fits you the best. We were big LogRocket fans, but I know there's a lot of people on the market and everyone has different needs. And then I generally think that once you get in the product, the benefit to you will become self-evident. Like whatever works for your company and what you're trying to do with your product, it's going to be clear how you could get value out of that. And then it'll influence your next decision. Do we need to try a different product? Do we need to maybe scale up? Is it time to invest in a license from a freemium tier or something like that? But that's kind of what I've seen. And again, it kind of sells itself once you get a chance to put hands on it.
I think where it can also become quite difficult is to then justify to business why you need to pay for an extra product, right? And I think in this particular case, it's very, very clear because you can basically calculate how much time spent on figuring out all of those bugs and support requests. So instead of a half day, I'm going to have it in 15 minutes in LogRocket. Or how much time it would take me to, analyze this dark mode issue. Like, would we even figure out? And how many customers would be upset, like customer sentiment and things like that. So you can definitely justify it on all of those metrics and time spent on the analysis as well to the business.
a lot of companies already have some sort of product analytics tool in-house. Could be Pendo, Amplitude, Mixpanel, something like that. And as Moshe and I have discovered, they're building these things along the way. They could have started with session replay to start with, or product analytics to start with, but they've brought these features on board their platform. So whether you know it or not, you probably have access to session replay in some aspect. So it's probably easy to get started, and then you can work your way up to paying for more.
That's great. Thank you so much, Zack and Nikki. Where can people reach out to you if they want to hear more?
Probably for me, LinkedIn. I'm on there. Zack Phillips. You look me up. I'm public out there. And I keep it pretty simple. I'm not on any of the other platforms. So.
Yeah, and same for me on LinkedIn. If I'm not on holidays, I'm usually there. So you can message me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Zack and Nikki, thank you so much for joining us on the show. This is a great conversation. Thank you, Moshe, as always. Thank you to the listeners. Really appreciate you, and we'll talk to everybody next time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.